So for those who don't know me, I'm Congresswoman Becca Balint. I'm very happy to be here today. And thank you so much for giving attention to this very important topic. So I want to start by saying we are a nation full of people who care deeply about freedom and about opportunity. That's who we are. And these ideals are central, not just to who we are as Americans, but to who we say we are as Vermonters. And we have been and will continue to be a nation of immigrants. I myself am a child of an immigrant, a man who came here after losing family in the Holocaust, came here to build a new life. We have an economy across the country that's absolutely dependent on migrant labor and immigrant labor. That is just the truth of it. And that's true here in Vermont too, and I know so many of you in this room know that. So we all know we have an acute workforce here in Vermont. I've been told by farmers in so many pockets of the state that they couldn't survive without migrant labor. Farms in Vermont would not survive without migrant labor, okay? And many of Vermont businesses rely on H-1B visas, H-2A visas, and nationwide. Here's the picture. From construction to farming, restaurants, hotels, motels, manufacturing, landscaping, groundskeeping, transportation, warehouse work, healthcare, home health aides. Millions and millions of these workers are undocumented. That is the truth of the situation. And let's have some real talk here, okay? We are not going to deport 11 million people. We're not. We don't have the resources to do that. We don't have the infrastructure to do that. And American employers across the country know that they need these workers who are absolutely vital to the success of their businesses. And we've already heard from them, and they're already reaching out to the Trump administration saying, what are you doing? People are not here picking my oranges. People are not here in our manufacturing plants. That is the reality. Now, we were told by candidates J.D. Vance and Donald Trump during the campaign that they would use mass deportation to go after the most dangerous who were here illegally. That's what they said, that they were going to do this to keep our country safe. But their horrible rhetoric directed at migrants and immigrants reveals something different and very disturbing, and I believe runs against everything that we say we stand for as Vermonters. So if you look at the speeches that candidate Trump and candidate J.D. Vance gave during the campaign, and just look at the last 20 speeches that they gave in the campaign, they said that they would use mass deportation to go after the most dangerous people who were here illegally. But if you examine what they actually said, you see something very different. He said he would rescue us from bloodthirsty immigrants. He said they were rapists. He said they were the most violent people on earth, that they were ruining the fabric of the country. He has even said that immigrants and migrants are genetically predisposed to commit crime. He has said that they are animals, that they are the worst people, that they are the enemy from within. He spread horrible lies about Haitian immigrants. And he continues to this day to repeat lies that countries around the world are illegally emptying their prisons and mental institutions and sending these people to the United States. For Trump, this was never about securing the border. It was about generating hatred and fear aimed at millions and millions of immigrants and migrants, including people who work right here in Vermont right now. So now let's be honest. Congress and many presidential administrations have dropped the ball on comprehensive immigration reform. That is also true. There is no question that we need bipartisan solutions to immigration. Because when I talk to Vermonters, what do they say that they want? They want a humane system. They say they want an orderly system. Yes, they want security at the border. They don't want people trafficking in drugs and individuals. This we agree on. But when we offered a bipartisan solution, then candidate Trump reached out to Republicans in the Senate and said, kill the bill. It's not just me saying it, they're on the record. The directive came from on high, do not solve this problem, I want to run on it. And that's what he did. So now here we are. We got mass roundups and deportations of thousands of migrant workers since his return to the White House. We've got ICE now showing up at schools and churches and hospitals and rounding up families. And again, we were told that this administration would target the most violent, but that's not what's happening. Many law-abiding migrants and immigrants and even American citizens are being swept up in these roundups. That is the truth of it. So, meanwhile, the president goes on Fox News with Sean Hannity and insists that you can tell which immigrants and migrants are going to be trouble by just looking at them. The rhetoric is so dangerous. We can't ignore it. We can't normalize it. And this is a plea that I am making to all Vermonters, regardless of political party, regardless if you voted for Donald Trump or you did not, regardless if you even voted at all. My plea is this: I do not believe that Vermonters want us to be a nation that categorizes, demonizes, and locks people up because of how they look. This is true lawlessness. This is true lawlessness. So now, let's be clear. The president is not just going after folks who are coming here illegally. He is also going after folks who are coming here legally. He has halted flights for Afghan people who had been fully cleared to enter the United States, all with completed paperwork and many with time-sensitive situations and documents. These are people who served our country when we needed them in Afghanistan, who have waited so long to come here, and they face the danger of remaining in Afghanistan. And Trump is also attempting to remove birthright citizenship, which is explicitly protected in the Constitution. So, as I said, I do not believe this is about keeping us safe. And I don't think this is what Americans or Vermonters had in mind when we talk about immigration reform. So again, what do Vermonters want? They want less chaos at the border. They want a more humane and organized system, a system that allows us to do multiple things at once: protect us, keep drugs from crossing the border, prevent horrible trafficking of human beings, keeping families together. But that is not what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, and it's not what we're going to continue to see in the future. So let's bring it back to Vermont. Migrant workers in Vermont pay taxes. A lot of people don't realize that. They pay taxes. They're not takers, they're givers. They're giving in to the system. They contribute to the nearly $76 billion collected from undocumented workers in the United States. It's keeping our economy afloat. We have an aging population in Vermont. We have a workforce crisis. They're making it possible for farmers to milk their cows, to harvest their crops, keep their farms afloat. So we can and must have very strong policy discussions and strategies on what we should do for comprehensive immigration reform, and I welcome that. But here in Vermont, we should not be part of a dangerous, cruel national conversation that demonizes and dehumanizes our neighbors, that dehumanizes migrant workers and immigrants. So that's why I'm here today. It's why all these folks are here today, because we are a nation of laws. And there are rules that govern the interaction between federal officers, law enforcement, and those migrants and immigrants living in Vermont. I want to make sure that everyone in Vermont knows their rights and understands what protections are in place right now. I have posted some of that information on my website, which is balint.house.gov/knowyourrights. Once again, balint.house.gov/knowyourrights. And I'm so grateful to Attorney General Clark and all the other speakers here today who are making sure that all who live here in Vermont know their rights and can exercise those rights whenever they are stopped, either by a federal agent, by law enforcement here in Vermont, or by another citizen who has taken it upon themselves to harass and try to detain them on their own. So thank you again for being here. As you can tell by the sound of my voice, this is incredibly important to me, and I'm so grateful you're here. And at this point, I'm going to turn it off to Attorney General Charity Clark.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you to all the speakers who are here today. You know, it is disappointing to see the president fail to focus on the issues that I'm sure Congresswoman Balint has heard what I've heard when she travels around the state. We have real issues in Vermont, and they are housing crisis. They are affordability crisis. It is our climate resiliency issues. It is public safety. In place of this focus, the president is creating chaos and violating the Constitution, and that's where I come in. As your Attorney General, it is my job to uphold the Constitution of the United States. As your Attorney General, I have been given the power to sue on behalf of the state of Vermont, and I have. I want to reassure Vermonters that the lawyers of my office are working night and day, reviewing and analyzing every single executive order and all the other questionable acts. And we have already filed a lawsuit with 19 other state attorneys general challenging President Trump's executive order trying to end birthright citizenship. This executive order, thank you. This executive order, which would have denied citizenship to babies born in the United States solely because of their parents' immigration status, is plainly unconstitutional. Within 48 hours, a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking the executive order from taking effect. And just Tuesday, we filed a lawsuit with 22 other states to block the memo out of the Office of Management and Budget, pausing all federal grants. Thank you. The executive order is, again, plainly unconstitutional and illegal, something a federal judge yesterday said he was inclined to agree with us on. I am hopeful that by the end of the day tomorrow, we will have an order out of that court ending, at least for now, that executive order, or that order from the OMB. I also issued a joint statement with the Human Rights Commission affirming support for the LGBTQIA community and our united commitment to enforcing Vermont's anti-discrimination laws, regardless of changes to federal policy. And that is because, regardless of changes to federal policy, the law in Vermont is clear that businesses, public agencies, housing providers, and employers may not discriminate against people based on their gender identity. I want trans Vermonters in particular to hear my words. I will do everything in my power to protect you. I also joined 12 other state attorneys general in a joint statement about the Trump administration's plans related to immigration that Congresswoman Balint spoke so eloquently about. The public needs to know that the president cannot commandeer state and local law enforcement to carry out his mass deportation agenda. That would be unconstitutional. And it's state and local law enforcement's job to keep us safe. They need to focus on public safety. I know these times feel chaotic and unnerving. I and attorneys general across this country have been preparing for months for this. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and that is exactly what I am doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charity. I want to now introduce Tracy Dolan, who is the State Refugee Office Director. Is going to speak about the status of refugee resettlement programs here in Vermont and state resources available to Vermonters. Oh, there you are.
Thank you very much. I am Tracy Dolan, and I'm the director of the State Refugee Office. We are so proud to have refugee resettlement in Vermont and the great work that resettlement has done for refugees in Vermont. Refugee resettlement is such an important part of building this state. There are so many roles to it. The first primary role is really the humanitarian aspect of being able to provide a safe place for people to come who are fleeing from war or other disasters. And they do arrive here. And then the very important piece of then building community, growing our workforce, growing our economy. This year, in federal fiscal year 25, which started in October 1st, we had hoped to receive about 650 refugees into Vermont. Unfortunately, with the executive order a few weeks ago, all refugee arrivals were halted from coming into the United States. So we had received about 160 at that point in that first quarter. And the impact, of course, on the refugees themselves. Right now in the world, we have more refugees than we've ever had due to all the strife and conflict. So there's so many people, and it is a lottery ticket to be able to get refugee status and come to a place like the United States, to come to a state like Vermont. We hear over and over from refugees that they feel so welcome by Vermonters. They meet so many Vermonters who go out of their way to try to help them out and connect them to communities, to services, to jobs. And so the impact, of course, on folks who cannot get here. And then the impact on the people who are already here, and maybe they are awaiting reunification with family members. In some cases, they heard that flights were canceled literally days after the order went into effect. Very difficult. And to call out particularly our Afghan community, we do have people from Afghanistan here who did fight side by side with our forces, who were promised that their families would come as well. And to know that those plans had been canceled in many cases literally within days of the order is very devastating. And then the other piece that you may not be as aware of is about 5 days after that first order, there was another order. It was a stop work order. It appeared to be aimed at stopping the work of foreign aid, but within that umbrella, the other piece that was in it was the reception and placement services that refugees are given when they arrive. So when a refugee arrives here, they do need some intensive services in those first 90 days to get them on that path to self-sufficiency that, by the way, they all want to be on. It's the first thing they ask when they get off the plane: when can I go to work? You know, and so they arrived here and they didn't have now that service for the first 90 days. They were issued a stop work order, so the resettlement agencies had to figure out, how do we give some minimal level of services now that we are not able to get funding to do that? And the state is working with them to be as flexible as we can, but that is a real hit. So just to reiterate, it's so important, refugee resettlement. But what we are doing is we're going to continue to serve the people that are here. We have dedicated people all across this state, the community partners, the volunteers, the people that you don't see maybe at the agencies or in this room right now. So many stepping up. I want to leave you with a quote from a student. We had refugee college students arrive just a couple of weeks ago. And as they were thanking a room full of people who supported them, one young man, I believe his name was Rami, from Syria, he stood up. His hope is to be a lawyer someday. And he said to this crowd, he said, I want to let you know, he said, with this opportunity, I promise I will leave this world a better place than when I found it. And if that's not something we can all aspire to, I don't know what is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tracy. And now I would love to bring up to the podium Jill Martin-Diaz, the Executive Director and Legal Advocate at Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Congressperson Balint for lifting up our work, and to Attorney General Clark for your leadership, and Tracy for holding it down this week. We're We're so grateful. I am Jill Martin Diaz. My pronouns are they, them. I am really lucky to be a seasoned immigration lawyer, and I am so proud to be transgender. I want to open up my remarks with some updates about things that have been happening for our organization and the clients that we serve in real time just in the last 24 hours. Last night, a staff attorney who works at my organization was accompanying our client to a routine Department of Homeland Security appointment that is a normal step in pursuing the kind of pathway to humanitarian status that this person is pursuing. On the drive home, they were stopped at a routine road traffic stop on Riverside Drive, where there were vehicles that appeared to be ICE vehicles, black vehicles, SUVs with red license plates, but also other types of law enforcement vehicles. We don't know what agencies they came from, that were stopping cars randomly, as the Constitution permits law enforcement to do under certain circumstances. Asks my staff attorney to explain herself, the client who was the passenger in the front seat. They were able to produce documentation of the person's pending immigration matters. And interestingly, the ICE agent asked the staff attorney who works at my office to prove that she was representing her passenger, to provide proof on form USCIS G28. We were not in a legal proceeding, so it is really legally, I struggle to understand why that was asked of the staff attorney, and they were both understandably very afraid of the situation. They complied, and the situation at our office has been really tense ever since. Today, I'm hearing reports that there are black SUVs with red plates driving up and down on North Street, which is where our office is located. We are not open for walk-ins, so please, take that information with care. We are hearing reports of similar, ICE agents or those vehicles being spotted in shopping center parking lots, outside of Western Union transfer stations. And it's happening right here, right now in our community, right? The time is now. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to say about what our constitutional rights are that have not changed, right? Amidst all this change and chaos over the last week, the US Constitution remains. The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution sets limits around when law enforcement can intrude on our rights to privacy when we're in private spaces like our home, or quasi-private spaces like schools, or public spaces like Riverside Drive. And one message I have for everyone is that it is no longer safe for a lawyer like me to call our community members who need to know this information into a public gathering to help elucidate for them their rights and to clarify what we know to be true. We at Vermont Asylum Assistance Project are building a library in partnership with the University of Vermont, working with refugee social work students who are helping us to make the website ever more accessible, multilingual, and informative. There are videos, infographics, notice on the calendar of webinars and other educational events. It is really important that we educate ourselves so that we can help educate others who can no longer gather together in person and community to learn their rights. It is also important that we don't leave it just to underdocumented and undocumented community members to invoke their rights. If only under and undocumented people are invoking their rights to remain silent and to ask for an attorney, then that may as well be putting a target on those people's back, right? So yes, a person with status can carry and should carry around proof of their pending applications, of their immigration situation, but consider educating yourself on your Fourth Amendment rights to clarify whether you're being detained, to remain silent, and to speak to an attorney so that we can show solidarity with the community members who are never going to have an immigration-related pathway toward protecting themselves from the harms that are being promised by the new administration, okay? The other thing to know is that federally, there are some laws that are changing. Last night, President Trump signed into law the Laken-Riley Act. The law intends to expand the circumstances under which Department of Homeland Security must mandatorily detain non-citizens they're prosecuting for enforcement of removal. It also gives the opportunity to state attorneys general to file lawsuits to challenge decisions made by immigration agencies about who should be detained and when. This means that the takeaway for Vermonters is that the surest way to avoid adverse interactions with immigration authority is to avoid adverse interactions with law enforcement. Seemingly benign infringements, even shoplifting, certain kinds of conduct, now, as of last night, could give rise to mandatory detention for non-citizens being prosecuted for removal. And so that's going to be a real key piece of our work, and something that we're doing at Vermont Asylum Assistance Project, absent one state government or public-based champion for the whole immigration sector across affinity groups, language, geography. It's difficult for us to be organizing ourselves, and we're getting there, and we appreciate your patience. But one thing we're doing is we've put up an ICE raids activities tracker on our website. We encourage people to anonymously report what they see, and know that the data comes to me and the rapid response team at Migrant Justice. If you want us to be able to follow up with you, you can share your personal info there. And this way we can at least continue to be a resource to the community, sharing with you folks what people are seeing and hearing around the state, including as far down south as Brattleboro, where ICE agents were spotted in the Hannaford parking lot today. Finally, with respect to all of these executive orders and all of the policies that are changing, as a lawyer, I have a duty of competence that's required for me to renew my license every year. I can't help but wonder whether there is some ethical incompetence happening in terms of some of the executive orders that are being passed clearly illegally, seemingly just to spark fear and to stop us from being able to proceed with business as usual. There is business as usual. We are filing new applications for humanitarian and other forms of immigration status every day, including today. That's what the VAP staff are working on, and including staff at a lot of our partner organizations. Those laws have not changed. A person's right to seek asylum is unchanged. You need to be present and afraid to trigger access to due process rights. Yesterday, the Department of Justice issued a press release here in Vermont notifying us that 3 individuals had been charged with immigration-related federal crimes. 2 of those, the crimes that they were charged with was evading immigration border crossing. So what that means is, just as we predicted a year ago, when we start to foreclose safe and regular pathways to seek asylum, as is our right under federal law, people are resilient and desperate, and they will find irregular ways to try and keep themselves safe. What is happening right now is by design, but we are not going anywhere. So I want to close with one set of letters for you: www.vaapvt.org. We want to hear from you about what resources are missing, what the community needs. We thank you for being in solidarity. And final plug, Treasurer Mike Pichak has convened a federal transition task force to try and mitigate the economic harm to Vermont of the new administration. Next Thursday, February 6th, businesses, nonprofits, managers of any entities, if you are someone who has a quasi-public space that is where you work or where you're in charge of managing other people, come to this free webinar that's being organized by the Transition Task Force in partnership with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. We're going to talk a lot more depth about how to interact safely with immigration enforcement. I'm sorry that this is happening, and I appreciate everything all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much, Jill. They're so helpful. And I'm also going to ask Molly Gray to come up. She heads the Vermont Afghan Alliance, and I thought she might have a word or two to share with us about what she's hearing from folks that she works with directly. Come on up. Thank you.
First, I just want to thank Congresswoman Balint for the opportunity to say a few words. I wasn't expecting to speak, but really to come here and support And also tremendous thanks to Attorney General Charity Clark for the incredible work fighting these orders that have impacted us. Our funds are frozen right now as an organization. Even on the drive down today, we called the payment management system to ask what was happening, and they can't tell us anything. And again, to Tracy for all the incredible support through what has been honestly one of the hardest weeks, not only for our organization that supports Afghans across the state, but also I know for our partner organizations and organizations across the country. I just want to share a couple of anecdotes to really give everyone here, if you're not working in this space, and I know there's many people here who are, just what the last week has been like. It has been a systematic abandonment of the Afghan community in Vermont and nationally, and of refugees. It started on Monday, a week ago Monday, when we learned that the flights of family members of Afghans in this state who were cleared to travel from Pakistan were stopped, including the family members of an individual in this room who had went ahead and got an apartment that was required to host his family by the Refugee Resettlement Agency. So now also on the hook for an apartment with a family that's not coming. On Thursday, we learned of the DHS deportation directive, which was supposed to apply to humanitarian parolees. Nowhere in that directive were Afghans exempt, which means that Afghan allies, and I'm going to call them veterans, who served directly with US military forces and supported diplomatic missions, who have not yet, 3.5 years later, had their employment letters provided to them for their special immigrant visas, they are now subject to deportation unless they urgently apply for asylum. So we've been filing asylum claims for them around the clock for the last several days. Then on Friday, as Tracy mentioned, all funds for refugee programs designated by the Department of State were frozen across the country, meaning that refugees, including Afghans who had already arrived here and were within their first 90 days of arrival, had funding stopped. Can you imagine arriving in a country that it's opened its doors to you and have nothing to start your new life? Then let's fast forward to Monday, when the next blow came, which was the White House OMB memo saying that all federal funding and grants were stopped for the woke, Marxist, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we know the list. Like, I'm not even going to enumerate it, organizations, including for an organization supporting Afghans here in Vermont. Our funding is frozen. We can't access it. Our driving program, which has supported 35 Afghans getting their license over the last year, including 10 Afghan women who could never have the opportunity to drive in Afghanistan. Our program is stopped. The car is in the garage. The impact, even here in Vermont, it is so significant. It is palpable. And I'm not going to end on a message of despair, because as I told my staff yesterday and the day before, and we continue to say today and tomorrow, that this is a moment to be courageous, to be strong, to carry on, to continue to provide the services that we know are so necessary in Vermont for these individuals to support our economy, to fill the jobs, to grow our tax base. We're going to continue on with our work, and we are going to be innovative and find new funding sources if we need to. If you want to get involved, I'm going to give you another website. Visit vermontafghanalliance.org. And also, again, just to thank Jill and all of the attorneys right now who are doing everything they can to ensure that there's durable pathways for our newest Vermonters. Thank you for coming. And again, tremendous, tremendous thanks. Where is Becca? For all you're doing and for your leadership in Washington.
So look, I've got incredibly knowledgeable and talented people behind me who are working on this issue. We have some time for questions. Please, you can address your question to anyone here. We want to give you information that will be helpful for Vermonters.
Question for the Attorney General. Thanks, number one, for holding this. This is really helpful. Are you aware of any ICE raids that have potentially happened on businesses or farms or anywhere here in Vermont as of yet?
I am not, but it's not like there's any statutory obligation to inform the AG of that. So others might actually be, like Jill might be in a better position. Her testimonial was insightful, so maybe you could speak to that.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Again, so we're still getting the word out about our ICE tracker, and so I don't hold out, that it is comprehensive. And keep in mind, these are anonymous reports, so I haven't confirmed. But we have had people submit to the ICE tracker on our website, and there's been submissions today since I've been arriving at the State House and navigating meetings that I haven't even read yet. So maybe at the end of this, I can update you. But yeah, so far we have confirmed arrests in the Williston Walmart parking lot. We have confirmed arrest of a child who, I'll just share, because I'm also mindful of attorney-client confidentiality, a child who is a student in a Chittenden County school district, who's one of their parent, the working parent, was detained by ICE. They live in employer-provided housing. We now see the writing on the wall that the custodial parent who doesn't work is not going to be able to make rent. We're worried that they're going to face eviction, either by their employer, landlord, or by their co-tenants, who are also underdocumented people. I have not yet been made aware of raids, and I would define a raid as immigration and customs enforcement activity that is not geared toward one individual that they're enforcing removability on, but instead it's like place-based. That said, we have heard about a lot of passive presence in shopping center parking lots, road stops, things like that.
Vermont's Fair and Impartial Policing Act also prohibits law enforcement from, coordinating or sharing information with ICE or other federal officials. Is there a concern that we may be losing out or we might have some sort of retaliation from the Trump administration for not acting along with the feds?
Well, we are doing what is constitutional, and so I don't know why he would retaliate against us for being constitutional. Our fair and impartial policing policy here in Vermont is as protective as it can be under the Constitution, and I want to reiterate, our local and state law enforcement is designed to protect public safety. That is their focus. Immigration authorities focus on immigration, and that's a federal issue, but local and state law enforcement should be focused on keeping the public safe.
I just wanted to add one thing that I forgot to mention, but now that we mentioned children, it came up. The Department of Children and Families is working with legal aid to try to prepare guardianship for those children whose parents may not be documented, so that in the event that those parents were removed, there would be guardianship already set up for the children so that they would not have to go into DCF custody. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge the refugee resettlement leadership, which is primarily former refugees. They're not here today, but I want to acknowledge that former refugees are really the leadership of much of the refugee service in this state, and wanted to acknowledge that along with the great people here. Thank you.
Attorney General Clark, could you, just to clarify, so in terms of the lawsuit that you're a part of, the OMB.
Which one?
Yeah. Yes, the OMB. I know that we don't have a final decision from the judge yet, but how do you expect that decision would be different from the judge in DC a couple of days ago that had a temporary pause until February 3rd? Would this be a complete blog? Do you know how that would be different, how they would work together?
So the lawyers behind me know what I'm going to say, which is the first step with something like this is what's called a temporary restraining order. And it has a lower evidentiary burden. And then a couple weeks later, you have the preliminary injunction. So what they're doing is saying oh wow, we need to stop this right now. But then in a couple weeks, we're going to revisit. We have a little more time. But the sense of urgency is where you bring the TRO in. In my personal experiences, TROs are very unusual. In fact, I'm really on a run here. I think before this, in my almost 20 years as being a lawyer, I think I had only had one granted. So it's been a great week for my my list of temporary restraining orders granted. I assume, and I shouldn't speak before the judge does, but based on what he said yesterday, I'm very hopeful that by the end of the day tomorrow, Judge McClellan, that was his name, Rhode Island is going to agree with the states, because he said he did agree with us. So that's the procedure. We will hear tomorrow, if I'm right about tomorrow, we will hear then what the schedule is for that next hearing that we'll have. But based on what he said, I'm feeling good about where we are in terms of the immediacy, and that means that to sort of play out what that means, the OMB memo froze funds. If there's a temporary restraining order on that, it means the funds need to be unfrozen.
Okay. Hi, sorry. Well, first of all, you got me so choked up earlier that I had to leave the stage. So I've heard you speak incredible words, and I know you've both been incredibly busy protecting Vermonters on so many levels. There are two groups that you haven't spoken to yet, but I know you've got something to say to them. The first group is for employers who are confused about, can I keep doing DEI work? Can I still protect employees? What if somebody tries to come to my facility? What am I supposed to do? So to them. And then the other group are the people that are actually the potential threat, the people that are threatening 15-year-olds trying to walk around the mall who are getting followed by large, quote, white Vermonters questioning who they are and whether or not they belong there. The parents who are afraid, right? I don't want you to speak to them. Obviously, you've done a great job of showing them love and respect. What do you say to the people who are being empowered and emboldened by these orders that they don't understand? So can you speak to the employers about who are afraid about whether or not they can continue these initiatives, and to the people who are being emboldened to follow children and question Black women who are just trying to get their lives at the supermarket?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tabitha. Look, the environment that we are in right now has been carefully constructed over many years since Donald Trump has been a public figure. It is not only at his feet that I put this, but I know from communicating with constituents that there has been a permission structure given for people across the state to try to take law enforcement in their own hands. Now, when you have the President of the United States saying, you can tell if somebody is a bad immigrant or a bad migrant just by looking at them, that is a permission structure for people to go after people of color writ large across this state and cast suspicion on them while they are just trying to live their lives. And, I certainly know that I'm going to be hearing more at the state level, at the federal level, what we can possibly do about this. But it is a concern. I will anecdotally, I stayed in DC during the inauguration, and I attended the inauguration on Monday and went out, and did my the usual things that I do in DC. And I can tell you, from waiters, waitresses, bartenders, Uber drivers, taxi drivers, anyone in the service industry, the kind of hatred and vitriol they received at the hands of some people, and I want to make it clear, some people who came to the Capitol for the inauguration, is alarming. And we as Vermonters, we need to be witnesses to this. When we see this happening, we need to be recording it. We need to be not just silent allies, we need to be outspoken allies. It's going to take, as many people have spoken here about courage and bravery, this is a time to stand up for all Vermonters. The other thing that I want to say, to your point, these executive orders, these pronouncements that are happening within government concerning DEI and wokeism and Marxism and transgenderism, they are so broad that they will sweep up nearly every single federal program that has been put in place to help Americans. Does your program service women? Oh, wokeism. Does your program service the LGBTQ community? You're going to have your funds taken. This is a concerted effort to strip money away that will help regular Americans and Vermonters from across the political spectrum. And I'm sure there are other people that want to speak on this matter, because it is something that is deeply alarming to all of us.
I'll just address the really good question about employers. I have two resources to offer. My civil rights unit are experts in employment discrimination and a lot of things related to civil rights. So anyone should feel free to call my office and get resources that way. I'd be happy to connect anyone who wants to, get some resources. The other is just generally speaking, we have a small business advocate at our consumer assistance program who is a wonderful liaison and has a ton of information. So if you have a small business owner who's looking for support, she would be someone who could help them navigate and provide feedback. So just a couple of resources. Otherwise, very well said, Becca.
I just want to add, all sorts of things come up all the time. Applicants and clients come to the office and they've been discriminated against in a place of public accommodation. And as the Attorney General knows, we have systems in place to document that, report that. The Human Rights Commission has the power to investigate, and it's so important that everyone here knows that. So if you see something, report it so that we have the information and it's going into the bias incident reporting system. And then as an organization, we will not let someone into our office or into our building who does not have a signed judicial warrant, full stop. And it's really important that employers know that.
Which order? So there are so many orders, but I don't know if those of you who have reviewed them can see. Most of them don't actually do anything right now. They say, hey, agency of such and such, will you look at this and do something? And so that's important context. One thing that I am doing, and along with 24 attorneys general across the country, is we really are combing every single executive order to see, has federal law been violated, like the Administrative Procedures Act, or has the Constitution been violated? And if it is, we're going to hold people accountable. So that's part of the work that we're doing to analyze all of those executive orders.
Attorney General Clark, I'm wondering, are you confident that the American judicial system is strong enough to deal with the issues that you've been outlining today?
I will say it's an unusual time in history. I think the judiciary is being strained. It's one of the things that I've lamented is the colossal waste of time this chaos has created for government attorneys, stakeholders, and nonprofits who support people, and definitely the judiciary. This is totally unnecessary. I hearken to the federal judge in Washington who said that he was appointed by President Reagan, and he said in his 40 years on the federal bench, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like he'd never seen something so unconstitutional before. What a waste of time. That should never have gone into effect. They wasted everybody's time. But to answer your question in a quick way, I would say yes, I am confident in the judicial system, because I'm confident in America, and I'm confident that our democracy will withstand this kind of behavior by a president.
And on that note, we have to wrap, but I know that there are people who still have questions. I'm sure a number of people behind me are willing to answer more questions if either individuals or press want to hang around. I've got to get to another event, unfortunately, but thank you so much for caring about this issue. Thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody for being here. Nice work, everybody.